is Tuesday, November 1st, and it is 6 o'clock, and this is a meeting of the Law and Ordinance Committee. On my left is Mr. Bobby Phillips, on my right, Ms. Lynn Snee, and my name is John Schweizer, and we are here to discuss medical marijuana and its dispensaries. Mr. Titterington?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, this is with regards to the medical marijuana, not only dispensaries, but cultivation and processing. You have a report from us that indicates that the Planning Commission has met a couple of times on this issue, and the recommendation that the Planning Commission has forwarded unanimously is that Council consider an ordinance that prohibits cultivation and processing operations and allows up to 5 dispensaries. Those dispensaries would only be allowed within the B1, B2, or B4 business district, would not be allowed within the B3 district or in any designated area of the historic district downtown. And that is because we do have some overlap with other business districts within the downtown historic district. For your edification, at your places you have a map that color codes the different business districts. I believe that's it. That's it. Yeah, we did have a public hearing at the last council meeting, and I think you
a couple of people
recollect a couple of comments.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How did we come up with the 5 dispensaries? Where did that number come from?
What we looked at was recognizing that pharmacies probably will not be dispensaries because of conflicts with federal law. Nonetheless, we reported to the Planning Commission that there are 5 pharmacies in town, and so that just seemed like a number that would make sense if we were looking at the 3 different business districts.
And I talked to the pharmacists out at Meyer, and they said that there is a derivative of pot, CNC or CNB. Mr. Tremblay, if you can help me with that.
There's a THC.
There's a THC, but there's also a CN something. That's a CNB, and that's a derivative, and it gives you the benefits without the high, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I believe the Meyer Pharmacy does dispense that.
And by pot, you mean marijuana, not the cooking utensil?
Yes.
Okay. Just checking. Thank you.
We need that clarification. Who can prescribe medical marijuana?
I have no idea.
Do we know, Mr. Kerber?
Right now, the Department of Health is, they're still formulating some of the rules and regulations with regard to that. It's going to be required to be a physician.
It can't be a nurse practitioner?
Well, and that, I guess there would be a potential for that. It's going to be some sort of health professional. But they're slowly developing some of the rules that are involved with regard to this. And right now, it's not set forth. Those rules haven't come out yet. This legislation would not impact any sort of, doctor's ability to prescribe, make prescriptions, or nurse practitioners to make prescriptions or anything like that.
Would a dispensary be permitted to have a doctor on premise to prescribe medical marijuana?
That's going to come from the state law, and the state's going to make those decisions. There's a very narrow area that municipal subdivisions have the ability to regulate these, and just primarily zoning for these 3 different things. All these other things are going to be determined by the state.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
John, I talked with a doctor of pharmacy today who is on the pharmaceutical board working with the state on this. And he said that doctors will not be able to write prescriptions, that they will only be able to give a recommendation based on the list of approved diseases, or I think there's 21 conditions that are approved, and medical doctors will only be able to give a recommendation. They can't write a prescription.
Okay. What I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the committee to consider amending the legislation and strike out the B1 and B2 language out of the legislation and just consider a B4. And I do that for a couple of reasons. And the overall umbrella reason is we don't know where this is going to go in 5 or 10 years. If it goes to recreational marijuana, I would like to have it where it's not downtown, close to neighborhoods. Most of the third ward is residential, with a good portion adjacent to the downtown business district. As you're aware, within that business or that district, there are several restaurants and bars. Many of these patrons that choose to park within the neighborhoods to avoid detection by police, 99% of those patrons do not create problems. There is still a small percentage that do. In the downtown business district, we hold several events like the Troy Strawberry Festival, Taste of Troy, and the International Festival, not to mention Friday night and Sunday night concerts. So a B4 business district is a highway business district, Walmart, the hotels across the street from the Walmart are within that B4 business district, as is Hothead Burritos and the Shell gas station out on Dorset. Any thoughts from the committee?
Well, question for clarification, if you're considering that, the current recommendation has 5 dispensaries, up to 5 dispensaries with the 3 business districts. Would you still want to consider 5 within that narrower zoning designation?
I would think we could cut it back to 3 and still be comfortable.
And if I may ask a question that's not directly related to your amendment at this point, or proposed amendment. I want to go back to a comment that you made, Mr. Titterington. If I heard you correctly, that you said pharmacies would not be the businesses dispensing medical marijuana because of conflict with federal law?
I believe it's along the same line of reasoning as what Mrs. Oda mentioned with regards to medical doctors. Marijuana is considered a Schedule 1 drug. It was just reaffirmed as Schedule 1 month or two ago. And so when it comes to licensing by the FDA, I believe, there are risks to pharmacies as well as potentially medical doctors. I don't quote me on that. With being certified, being licensed to prescribe, and so what we've heard and what we've read in the news, in the media, is that the large pharmacies will probably not be in the business of dispensing.
And understanding that, I guess I'm wondering, what are we envisioning that a dispensary business this would be their sole business to dispense medical marijuana, that it would be another business that did that on the side?
It could be. I mean, that's just depends on how lucrative it is, what the individual's business plan might look like. It may be part and parcel of a different business, but this is a part of it. We don't know.
My understanding is I read something today and it said that they can't distribute anything that you smoke. It has to be vapor or edibles or things
I believe
along
those rules came out today that we were made aware of from the
that's
state.
with regards to cultivating.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to ask that first.
Mr. Phillips?
I'm perfectly happy with the staff recommendation as is, especially with the exclusion of Southwest Historic District and the Downtown Business District. With the law, as I understand it, Mr. Kerber may correct me if I have misquoted what I have read, but again, it's not the smokable recreational items that some folks throughout the country get a little excited over. This is purely a medical bill with tinctures, oils, edibles, and that sort of thing for various limited medical purposes. I have some irritation with the federal system in their classification on the Schedule 1, which indicates that there is no socially redeeming value, according to the feds, in this drug. However, there are a lot more potent and legal drugs that create much larger problems of addiction and other associated issues than marijuana. And having personal friends and relatives that have had, a limited number of these folks, that have had issues that have used these products that have greatly alleviated their symptom or gotten them through their illness, cancer, and other things. I am fully supportive of the medical marijuana initiative and as it's proposed in this ordinance. But again, wanting the downtown and Southwest Historic District, as we've outlined here, exempted from that. So I don't think that there should be a stigma attached to it because of the medical issue. And I would hate for folks that have medical conditions to feel like they are being looked down upon and relegated to the furthest corners of our community when they have verifiable issues. And so that's I have a lot more of the reasons, but those are my basic outline of things.
And no one's trying to deny anybody from the benefits that they derive from medical marijuana. And again, my concern is what happens down the road when we go to recreational marijuana. And it's going to happen. I mean, it's happening in 5 states on Tuesday. It'll probably go more because there's 25 states that already have medical marijuana.
No, I understand your concern, and that is a different bag of worms that we'll have to attach at that time, and I see that as a totally different issue.
But the question is, how do we pull back from that once that happens?
I think just like we're doing here with an ordinance restricting that. I know that in California, and I believe Colorado, they are in in our B4 area, that's how they relegate those recreational sales areas. Have seen them with the cities that I've gone to, have purposefully looked for them just to see what they look like and that sort of thing, and I believe that that is absolutely, if and when it becomes legal, which I don't support, that would be the place for it, but not in a downtown area. It's a different issue.
So what? I guess what are you saying? Are you
Recreation
saying?
and medicinal are two different.
Oh, I get
issues.
that. I get that. Are you saying? Are you supportive of just the B4, or do you want the B1, B2 designation also?
No, I'm supportive of this ordinance with the medicinal marijuana stuff that we're dealing with here as written. If and when recreational comes in, that's a different bailiwick, and I would not want it anywhere else except on the outskirts of anything if we had to do something like that.
But
So-
Mr. Schweizer has proposed an amendment to limit it to B4, so I guess I would be
I don't want to
curious
eliminate
too.
entirely.
No, we're talking two different things. We're talking about the proposal in the future of
No,
recreational.
no, we're talking about this current proposal for medical
I've
marijuana.
indicated 3 times I support this ordinance as written.
So then you're not in agreement with the amendment?
Correct.
Anything else?
No, not at this point, thanks.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Mrs. Oda?
Yeah, I'm wondering why we're doing this now when the state does not have their regulations set. Why are we doing this now? Why are we pushing this through?
So that we have something in place for when those regulations come out.
So then
The
we're
state has
saying-
up to 2 years to do this, Mrs. Oda, and, already today, we've read an announcement, a pretty sweeping announcement related to two out of the three aspects related to this issue, that being the cultivation and processing. And so, you know, we need to have our ducks in a row, if you will, so that we define what our standard is going to be. And since this is a zoning issue, once it's set, then we limit the ability to be grandfathered in if we extend the moratorium until after the regulations are put in place. You know, the question is do we risk those regulations going in, an application being filed, us not being in a position because of the process we have to go through to get the zoning updated, and then we have somebody grandfathered in prior to our rules being in place.
I feel like this is pass it, and then we'll find out what the rules are.
Mr. Chair.
The rules.
I would prefer that
okay,
we
the
table
rules,
this until the state has their stuff.
Well, I understand that, and that is not the recommendation from the staff, nor is it the recommendation of the Planning Commission. It goes back to the questions that Mr. Swayzer was asking that Mr. Kerber answered, and that is that, you know, there are certain questions that most of which will be handled by the state, but in the area of what to allow and where to allow it, that falls to the locality. And it is a zoning issue, it's a zoning question, and so you do get into legal non-conforming issues and you know, issues related to that. So having something in place now, regardless of what the rules that come out, they don't affect what this council can do related to the zoning.
If it's rezoned, do we have to accept whatever the state says in those dispensaries?
Okay, we're not rezoning anything, we're amending the zoning code to prohibit or restrict or define what can be done relative to medical marijuana and what can't. So it's not a parcel rezoning issue. If somebody comes to us and wants to take a parcel of land and make a B district out of it or change it to a B district designation, then whatever the rules and the laws that we have in place would apply to that parcel, again, subject to the council approving that zoning, that rezoning request. We can always, at a later time, entertain changes to the zoning code. We can always do that. We've done it in the past. We'll do it in the future, I'm sure. And so having something in place now does not mean that it is going to be there for the next century. It's getting something in place, having some rules set and defined in the event that there is some kind of a gap between when the regulations come in and when we can otherwise change our zoning so that we don't get into a gap, if you will.
I don't know, I'm opposed to
There's
rushing it through before the state.
Well, I'm not thinking that we're rushing it through when it's been twice before Planning Commission. They've made their recommendation to us. We've had it at 3 different meetings. We've had a public hearing. I don't really call that rushing things through. And this is a state issue, and we're trying to make a decision on what we can control, which is the zoning.
And we don't have to have it. We don't have to do it.
I'm not sure.
I-
You mean we
We
don't
don't
have,
have to
we can
have
prohibit all, we
dispensaries,
can, we can prohibit it completely. That is one of the options.
And so another question would be, like John said, why 5? Do we have demographics that support 5?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's what I
We
said
only have
before.
one liquor store. We're going to have
Mrs.
5 dispensaries?
Mrs. Oda, that is part of the debate that the state left to the localities. Do you want to have these? If so, where do you want to have them? How many of a particular, cultivation, processing, or dispensaries, how many of those are you comfortable with if you are, in fact, comfortable with having them?
I've asked some of my questions, so.
Ms. Snee?
I don't have any further questions. And I don't have any problem with your proposed amendment to limit it at this point to the B4 business district and reduce the number. I would be fine with that.
Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Baker, do you have any comments? Any other councilman have any comments? Mr. Heath?
Hi there. Brock Heath, 2263 Murphy Lane East, but you know that. Mr. Terrington, forgive me for asking you to repeat yourself, but I didn't catch all the risks that you said are associated with having it in the pharmacies. Was there a reason? I think you mentioned some reasons.
Oh, I don't
why
know about
pharmacies-
risks. It's, you know, it's really up to the individual pharmacy as to whether or not they want to also be a dispensary.
Okay,
We're not saying that they can't be. We're just saying that our understanding is that they probably, possibly, probably, whatever word you want to use,
okay,
will not, based on comments that more than one of the national pharmacy CEOs have made. And it goes back to the federal laws and the federal regulations and designation as a Schedule I drug.
Okay.
And the risks to FDA licensure related to their ability to dispense other prescribed drugs.
okay. So there's a possibility that if they get licensed for this type of drug, then FDA may pull their ability to. There's just-
That's not for me to say, but
Right.
that's always a possibility.
Well, there's some worry out there that's causing some of them to say, we're not going to carry this stuff.
If I may
Yeah.
add just a bit, there are many conflicts with the federal law and what the states are doing.
Okay,
And the federal law particularly gets into banking and finance and licensure with the other scheduled or Class II drugs. And the federal law, if a Walgreens, CVS, or whomever was going to go into this business, they would absolutely probably lose their licensing for legally accessible drugs at this point. Plus, they would not have access to banking, because this type of industry right now, it conflicts with FDC and other financial institutions. They cannot deposit into and/or accept credit card. It's strictly a cash business. And that there are many conflicting issues because of what the feds continue to do with their scheduling processes. And so it's not going to happen in any of the
already set.
large
pharmacies.
stores that we're familiar with.
Wow. So it would be some other type of, just somebody opens up a business and that's what they do, or somebody's going to run it off the side out of another business,
Right. I've heard
up to whatever they say.
from folks that I have spoken to that have been in these facilities in other states, they're, I would equate it to walking into a sports store that has a variety of different objects and things. And they apparently have been very professional looking and that sort of thing, but there's always, particularly when you get into the recreational end, some issues that could arise there with enforcement issues and things. But rules of not hanging around and businesses not wanting bad names and things like that, with what I have seen, has not been an issue, because these businesses do not want that sort of look,
Yeah.
if you will.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it couldn't happen, but they're businesses and that sort of thing. And particularly with the medical end, it's a different bailiwick than recreational, from what I have observed and spoken to.
Thank you for the information. I appreciate that. And I'm not sure if anybody is aware, but it sounds like this product is much different than the recreational version. So we're not going to have people that are doing this illegally, the recreation version. They can't, if they were to break into a store and grab some of this, they can't get high off this stuff. Is that right?
That is my understanding of a lot of
I know
the
you're not a
medical
doctor.
issues, or medical products, yes.
Okay. Thanks for giving your opinion on that. I know you're not licensed to talk about that too much, but.
He just plays one on TV.
You just, okay, good. We are on TV now, so.
Or YouTube.
Or YouTube right now. And then I think my last question or comment, I guess, is playing devil's advocate. If we say none of this in Troy, can they drive to Tip City and get it if they open it there? So we're not talking.
If Tip City
Right.
passes legislation that allows it, then yes, or whatever community that
Yeah.
allows it.
Right. So it's not that it's just unavailable to any, they just drive down to another city and grab it if we decide to keep it out of Troy.
If they had some kind of prescription or
Yeah.
whatever doctor's
Whoever
note.
legitimately needs this
Yes.
can just,
I would assume that would be,
right.
any prescription is good anywhere in the state.
So I go to Gander Mountain to get ammunition because we don't have it in Troy. It's not a big deal. The other question is, and I guess at this point, I like the amendment a little better than the original, just because, and I understand, Bobby, Mr. Phillips, what you were saying. It doesn't seem like it's in any kind of dark corners or feeling like they have to be relegated. Actually, it's in one of the hottest, most fastest growing parts of Troy, it looks like, right there at the Walmart and on the west side of 75, right? So that's a big populous area. That's not a dark corner at all. That's a,
And it's close to a number of doctor's offices
yeah.
also.
So it looks like a great location. Those are just where I'm at now as far as the comments to support the amendment and the reduction of down to 3. Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to keep thinking on this. I appreciate all the information.
You're welcome, Brock.
John, I will say that Dr. Sweeney offered today to come give a presentation to council and to answer questions from the state pharmaceutical board. He said he would be more than happy to come talk and answer questions.
Thank you. That would have to go through Mrs. Baker.
Well, that
Just throwing
probably,
it out there.
probably would have been appropriate to have gone through the public hearing 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Any other members of council have any comments or questions? Anyone in the audience? Mrs. Sneed, how do you feel?
I would support moving forward as amended.
Just one other thing before we go. Because of the information that we got today regarding the people that can grow medical marijuana, would you consider emergency legislation on this?
Why would
No,
emergency
to
legislation
prohibit-
affect?
To prohibit the growing of the
We're
marijuana.
already prohibiting that in Troy, as I understood it.
Not yet. That's what this legislation, part of this legislation does, is to prohibit the growing and cultivation of.
But why would we
marijuana.
need emergency when it is up for third reading Monday night?
It would still have, could still be, can still be,
There's still a moratorium in effect for the 6 months, and we'd be all right. We wouldn't have needed the emergency legislation on that.
okay. All right, thank you. You good with the amendment?
I'm fine.
Okay. And Mr. Phillips, you're,
The minority,
You want a minority report?
sure.
okay. Mrs. Knight, I guess 2 for and 1 against.
And I'll have to confer with Mr. Kerber because we have legislation in front of us, so we'll have to see what happens with an amendment, if that passes, and then if it does, what that does next to it, yeah.
It may carry over for an extra meeting with an amendment.
Because we amend it.
Okay. Anything else come before law and ordinance?
Yes, sir.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.